You're listening to Taste for Truth Weight Loss Encouragement. I'm your host, Barb Raveling. Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a great summer. I am getting on the podcast here in the middle of the summer to share a conversation I had with Sarah. And Sarah, I interviewed first about 4.5 years ago. She had lost weight. Since then, she has had 2 more babies in the last 4.5 years and also went through COVID. So it will be interesting to listen to that interview, see what God's been doing in Sarah's life. And I hope you gained some good insights from my conversation with her. I also wanted to remind you, or let any of you know who didn't listen to the last episode, that I will be winding down the Taste for Truth podcast. And I'm going to keep doing the Christian Habits podcast. I might every once in a while do a episode on that. I'm breaking free from the control of food. But as I get older, I'm just trying to simplify my life. And I love having the conversations with my guests on the Taste for Truth podcast. I love the coaching interviews, the victory interviews. They've been so fun, but I just have to make life a little simpler, and I need to get down to one podcast for that. So if you are waiting to do a victory interview, email me right away. That podcast, I don't know, I will probably go through January at the latest, maybe sooner. So we'd have to do that soon if you wanted to do that. And I also want to let you know I'm working on some online courses. I have never done those before, but I like doing them myself. I find them to be really helpful. And so if you want to hear about those, go to barbraveling.com/course, COURSE, and I will email you when I have one out. The first one's going to be on the renewing of the mind and also on truth journaling. And so I think it would actually be a really helpful one for breaking free from the control of food. So I'm working on a lot of resources that will still help, even though we won't be keeping this podcast going. Okay, let's get to today's podcast episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. It's so good to have all of you here today. And I'm excited to have a guest that I had on the podcast 4.5 years ago. You can listen to that interview. We'll put a link in the show notes, but had a great visit with Sarah, and I'm looking forward to catching up and seeing how things have gone. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah.
Thanks, Barb.
Well, why don't you begin by telling us just a little bit about yourself? First of all, I can tell you guys that we're having this interview. She's outside. I think you're my first podcast guest I've ever interviewed that's outside while they talk. So that's kind of fun.
That's funny.
Yeah, just tell us a little bit about your life.
I've got 3 kiddos, 5.5. Well, he'll be 6 in August, so closer to 6-year-old. 3.5-year-old and an 8-month-old. Mm-hmm. We live in Arlington, Washington. My husband works in the auto body industry. He's from England, moved here in 2014. And we met in Montana. I don't know if I spoke about that last.
No, I don't think so.
Time I haven't listened to that interview. Since probably right after it came out. But yeah, I was there. I went to law school in Seattle. I grew up in this area. And then I went to Cut Bank, Montana, and I did an internship with the Blackfeet tribe, doing wills and estate planning. And when I was there, my husband had come over from England to do custom cutting, like harvesting.
Right.
So there's companies that do custom cutting and they hire people from England.
Wow.
To come over and spend like 9 months harvesting the central belt of Washington or United States.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. Yes, I had never heard of such a thing. And we were both in this tiny town. Have you heard of Cut Bank?
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, I lived in Montana 30 years. So
Okay.
Or more than that, what's college, yeah.
Okay. It's like 1,000 people there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we met there, and he went home after his experience and came and visited me in Washington because I'd come back home. and we got engaged.
That's
And
great.
then he moved over here and yes. It took a while for us, a lot of dating for us to find each other, but it was a very quick process once we found each other.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yes, yes.
Wonderful to hear. And I remember when I interviewed you 4.5 years ago, I think your oldest was 2 years old. So you weren't far out of being a career person with your being
Yes,
a lawyer. And now
right.
you have 3 kids. So since the last 4.5 years, we've gone through COVID and you've had
Hmm.
2 more babies.
Right.
And are you still at home with the kids?
I am now. I worked when my second was born. Sorry, when my second child turned 2, I felt like I had the energy and the availability to work a bit because I hadn't since my first was born.
Uh-huh.
And we needed a bit of extra money because, of course, like the economy wasn't the best after COVID.
Right.
So I went back to work for a year and I worked one day in the office and then I worked from home like during weekends when my husband could watch the kids.
Oh, that's
And
nice.
I did that for a year and then my son was born 8 months ago and I haven't been back to work and we don't plan on it. I will definitely go back to work if I absolutely have to, but really that extra money that we had it didn't make life any better. It kind of, the stress of trying to be a mom and an attorney it just didn't feel quite right. Um, so I prefer to work like budgeting, if that makes sense.
Oh, yes.
Spending
No,
spending my
perfect
extra time
sense.
like saving money instead of juggling two huge responsibilities, So it for now, um, of course, if I have to go back to work, part-time or whatever, I will, but I think that's there's quite a lot that I would sacrifice before that would happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm interested to hear what's progressed in the last 4.5 years because
yeah.
when we talked, I can refresh your memory
Yeah, yeah.
since I just listened to your interview
Yes,
today,
thank
and
you.
you had been all excited. You felt like you had your perfect boundaries. You were
Mhm.
following them. You had done both freedom from emotional eating and taste for truth, and I think
Mhm.
sometimes you truth journaled in the evenings. And you still had struggled with anxiety at times. And I don't know if
Mhm.
you actually started renewing or doing anything for that. And I don't know if you are now. You had a little chart on the refrigerator where you put little
Mm.
stickers when you,
Mhm.
which
I
I
remember
think
that.
that led to me making charts. After I interviewed you,
Oh,
I started making little charts with stickers for like work boundaries or something. I don't
yeah.
remember. I
Oh,
just
that's
remember
great.
I went through a sticker phase
Yeah.
and, and I can't remember. Those were some of the main things I remember. But
Okay.
you were feeling like, oh, kind of have this down pat now. But you're one of
Yeah.
those people who, as soon as you got your boundaries, you only allowed yourself to tweak them once a month because you're a person who constantly wanted to change.
Mhm.
But you actually started following them kind of right from the get go. Whereas my story was more like kind of, truth journaling every once in a while for years. And I don't know if it took me 2.5 years or so, but
Mhm.
I didn't start right away. And I'm sure a lot
Okay.
of people who
Yeah.
are
It's just
listening are
slower.
like me. So why
Yeah.
don't you tell us where you are now, 4.5 years later, and two
Yeah.
kids and COVID later, when most people
Right.
gain weight during COVID. And with you just had a baby, so weight goes up and down as a baby. So it's not like
Mhm.
if you never had any babies, you can tell. But I'd love to hear where you
Yeah.
are now compared to 4.5 years ago.
Well, I tried to be thoughtful about what I what I would share because I have so much that I can share in like what I have experienced and grown from in the last, since we spoke last. But I think if I can start off from where we left off, we were trying to have our second baby when right around the time that we spoke. And with our first, we kind of got pregnant right away. And it took some time. It took, I think, 5 months, which isn't that long, but it felt really long.
Right?
Um, and it turned out like I had this inkling. I had this like in the back of my head, like, I just wonder if I'm not getting pregnant because I have lost this weight and my body's a little bit kind of like, whoa, we're not going to carry a baby. You've just, you know, you just made a drastic change. Like we're not going to get pregnant. And so after 5 months, I think I relaxed. I relaxed quite a bit. And I think I put on 5 or 10 pounds and I got pregnant just, in a snap.
Interesting.
And and during that time also, a big piece of this motivation I had, and like you said, like I started my boundaries, I started journaling, I hit the ground running. And a big piece of that motivation was I had had gestational diabetes with my first child, and I was like determined to not have that experience again and to do my best to be able to have a natural birth because I had a C-section with my first two and or, sorry, with my first. And so I had this like pretty significant motivation that was focused a lot around, the baby's health. And um the funny thing was I went and I got, my blood work done before I got pregnant after I had lost 30 plus pounds, with these boundaries. And I'd never had any issues with my blood work aside from the gestational diabetes when I was pregnant. But, other than pregnancy, I've always had great blood sugars and that's never been an issue. But I my my glucose was like borderline pre-diabetic. And I was really like, what? I have worked so hard. And I talked to my doctor. I'm like, what in the world? Why? Why is this? And that really frustrated me because I was expecting it to be great. And I think it I think looking back, I was eating a lot of fruit, which you wouldn't think would, and
Mm.
I'm not exactly sure. I'm not exactly sure what happened there, but I know, sometimes if you do things too quick, your body can get frustrated, or maybe it was just recalibrating or something. The doctor was like, don't worry about it. Just we'll keep an eye on it. Then let's see. So then I got pregnant after about 5 months. That pregnancy was great. Um, I stayed very active with that during that pregnancy, and I ended up having another C-section with the same issue. It just baby just doesn't want to come out. And oh, and that was right during COVID. And for me, I think one hard piece of the weight, like coming and going, is, when you're in the stages of pregnancy, post pregnancy, or preparing for pregnancy, you have different thoughts surrounding those different times of your life. And so for me, with each new phase, there were a different set of thoughts. And so when you're like with truth journaling, I tackled a lot of these thoughts that I had when I was after my first child and I was trying to get pregnant again. But then getting pregnant, you kind of have a whole nother set of like thoughts and expectations and motivations. And then after the child's born, it again changes, your motivation for wanting to lose weight changes. So after my second was born, I gained some weight back, kind of celebration, relief, kind of emotional type eating. And then I think I got to a point where I recognized that my exercising wasn't doing enough for my mental health, and I needed to increase the intensity. Um, and so I started doing CrossFit, which I had done a bit in college, um, here and there. I started doing CrossFit and immediately my mood, everything was just better. The intensity of like, because I don't know if you're familiar with CrossFit, but the first half component is more of like heavy weightlifting, you're taking your time, and the second half is more of a aerobic, lots of movement, quick, timed. A lot of times they're no longer than 10-minute workouts, but you're going
Mm.
like 100%. And so that was so helpful for my mental health, and it helped a lot with my weight because it just, you're burning quite a few calories at CrossFit, so it gives you um a big leg up on a one kind of, what's the term, suppressing your hunger a bit. So it helps in that way, it helps in your mood, which helped me with my emotional eating, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I remember you
And
said that exercise helped with your anxiety before.
yes,
Uh-huh.
yes. And I think when I got to this point of doing CrossFit, what I was doing, like my at-home workouts, I felt like it just wasn't enough. And I think this was in the middle of winter actually, where I was like, I need something more. And it was during COVID too.
Oh
So
yeah.
it was probably, I was probably depressed a little bit. And
How did
so
you make
all of that,
yourself start exercising? Because a lot of people have
how
a
to make
hard
myself
time.
start.
Yeah. How did or was that
Um,
hard, or did you have?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like a gradual thing. Yes, I think, and I currently am working with a pregnancy, prenatal, postnatal nutritionist, and we talk a lot about this. And she's reminded me lately, like, when you're first restarting working out, um, because I hadn't since my son was born, I'd stopped. It's really important to just remind yourself in the beginning when you're starting the habit up again and you don't want to do it, because it is harder at the beginning.
Right.
But I do think it gets easier once you get going. But at the beginning, you just have to remind yourself that this is for you. Like, it's so important for your body, for your mind, and you're doing this, for you, for your family, and just remembering that that's why you're doing it. And even if it's not fun at first, and reminding yourself that it will get easier. Um, and I think also, it like, I know people say this all the time, but like doing something you enjoy. And I know a lot of people would not enjoy CrossFit, but that for some reason it just really fits with my like temperament.
Huh,
I like
interesting.
I like to accomplish things and I like to be around people. Um, so and it's like a task and I can complete it and we're all doing it together and there's people to help me improve on it and I don't have to think. There's no thinking involved. They tell you what to do. Um,
Well, did you get bored? Because in our last interview, you talked about getting bored, and to me, that's my problem with exercise. I just get
mm,
crazy bored. Like I
yes.
get bored in a half hour class, an hour class.
Okay.
If I try and do something for 10 minutes on my own at home, I'm just so bored. It makes me not want to do it.
Yes. Yes, I have that problem when I'm at home. Like with the home workouts, with the YouTube workouts, I'm getting workouts right now from the nutritionist that I'm using, and I have a hard time. It's boring. And I think that's where, like, she reminded me, just, try to keep doing it because, you're doing it for good reasons. It's important. But I think if something is boring, like if you've done it for a while and it's still boring, maybe trying something different, because I I was nervous to do CrossFit because I'd hurt I'd hurt like my shoulder when I did it right after college. And so I was nervous. But what I was doing just wasn't working for me. So I think trying something different is smart, because I think, and giving it time too, right? Like giving yourself like time to like really see if it's something you can enjoy. Because I think at first, a lot of times things are not enjoyable. Um, but if you give it time and it's just not really enjoyable at all, then I think it's good to switch. With the boredom thing, I do not find CrossFit boring at all. It's so hard. It is so hard. And I think that's the pieces I'm being challenged so much. There's different moves that you do. There's like pull-ups and handstands and rope pull, like you're climbing a rope. It's so hard. So I think being challenged, I like that. So yeah, I don't
Okay, you
know.
can kind of see what type of person you are, maybe. Like, are you a
Yeah.
person who likes a challenge anyway?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay. And
absolutely.
see, I'm a person who really does not like a challenge.
Okay. Okay.
Like if I climb mountains, because I do climb really hard mountains, but I
Uh-huh.
do it for fun and I do it visiting
Yeah.
with somebody while I do it. I wouldn't do it by myself. So I wonder
Yeah.
if for somebody like me, it'd be good to find one fun motivated, like go to a
Yes.
dance class or
Yes.
although I'd love you guys talk to each other, I think, during CrossFit, right? Isn't there some social
Yes.
element? So I
That's
might like it just
always.
for that, just because
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah. And when I did it in college, I did it and felt that like I needed to be competitive with it. And I think that's why I didn't, it just was like, it was too hard. Like I wouldn't go because when I was there, I was pushing myself 110% because I wanted to be competitive. But this time when I went, I was like, no, this is not to be competitive. This is for me to enjoy this. And this is for me to fight against my anxiety. And
Mm.
they play the loud music when you're working out. And in my mind, I would say, I am not, I'm not doing this for to look a certain way. I am doing this in a battle against the devil. And that was my kind of motivator, kind of. So it helped me not hurt myself because I wasn't pushing my body to the point where I was hurting myself. I'm giving more like 75%, you know? So it's not killing me and it's more enjoyable. So,
Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess it just
yeah.
kind of relaxes your mind. Because usually when you think of a battle of
Yes.
against the devil, you think of quoting scripture or renewing your mind or
Mm-hmm.
different things like that. So how does exercise
Mm,
help in that battle? Because that
that's a
that doesn't
great,
sound logical.
right. That's a great point. So, the reason I even started CrossFit was because of prayer. Um, I prayed and prayed, and when I pray, I tend to prayer journal because I get distracted if I'm just talking or praying in my head. I have to write it. I have to write it down. And it was kind of like night after night of just like, this isn't, I don't feel right. Like I don't feel good. And my prayers keep coming back to like more intense exercise, like what I was doing, like going on some runs, doing some at home workouts weren't enough. So I was there because of my answer to prayer. And then kind of in terms of like using your body to fight, to fight in the spiritual battle. Um, I don't know. I guess if you want to speak logically, what I've learned more recently is that your muscles actually they create the hormones that are an antidepressant for your brain.
Mm.
So in your muscles, I don't know what it's called. I'm sure it is endorphins, um, something like that. I'm sorry, it's not as clear. And anyone listening, maybe go look this up. You could, I'm sure,
That's
find what it's
okay.
called.
We
Yeah.
need the bottom line. We don't
Yeah.
need to
So the
know all the
bottom line
words.
is these hormones live in your muscles and they do not enter your bloodstream and go to your brain unless you contract your muscle.
Interesting.
So it
Hmm.
squeezes the hormone into your bloodstream, and then your brain can utilize this antidepressant. And they're now saying that the general consensus is that exercise is more effective than antidepressants, pills.
Wow, isn't that interesting?
Yes. And I think that's a pretty new thing. So yeah, so for me, the I felt the battle was, you know, I could definitely feel a significant difference when I exercise and I wasn't having these like overthinking, like this worry, looking for problems almost, and overthinking. That's kind of where my little circle where I go in a circular motion, like a record player. And I notice a significant difference when I'm exercising. So for me, when I'm telling myself at CrossFit, I'm pushing myself um because I know it's better for my mental health. That's kind of where that's coming from.
Well, are you
If that
thinking
makes
it?
sense.
Yeah. Are you thinking anything while you exercise? Or are you just in the moment?
Um, because it is so hard, that's about the only thought that I get through because it really does you have to be completely in the moment, which I think is also very helpful for mental health, to be doing something that's challenging that forces you to be completely in the moment.
Yeah, I can
That
see
makes
that. I mean, God
sense.
created our bodies to work. And I do see too,
Uh-huh.
like if
Mm-hmm.
if I don't get my 10,000 steps a day, or like I only get 3,000 or something, I don't sleep as well at night. And
Mm-hmm.
also, I do notice if I'm just inside all day, I do get more depressed. So I do
Mm-hmm.
think getting outside,
Yeah.
exercising, I can see how CrossFit would help. So even though it's not like a quote spiritual practice,
Mm-hmm.
I can see how it would still help. And I don't know, I have this kind of weird thing that even if I'm listening to secular music, a lot of times those songs lead me to worship God. And I don't know why, because it's not usually
Mm-hmm.
like the words are, although sometimes you can tweak the words so it's worshiping
Yeah.
God. But there
Mm-hmm.
is something about music that leads me to worship God too, which is kind of odd.
Yeah. Well, I think that sometimes secular music, there is, the music is a gift. It's a gift from God. Music is, and those musicians that are creating that music have a gift from God. They're just not necessarily using it maybe how he would really want them to be using it. So they still have that gift. And maybe someone who becomes a Christian and switches to singing praise music, that would be a good example, like the person that they were singing secular music, but that's not, that's not what God wanted him to do, but that's why he gave him the gift to worship. I don't know. I just kind of train of thought there. I
Yeah.
haven't thought about that, but I agree with that. I have the same experience sometimes where you can kind of almost like tweak the words in your head a little bit.
Yeah. I'm thinking of one song. Let's see. It might be Lady Antebellum. I'm not sure. It's a
Mm,
country song, whatever it is.
mhm,
And the phrase is, when lies become the truth, that's when I run to you. And it's something
mm.
about like a love relationship. But
Okay.
when I've heard that song, I think of God. When lies become the
Mm,
truth, that's when I run to you.
yeah.
But what else would you have to say? So 4.5 years,
Hmm.
do you feel like overall you're still holding food with open hands? Do you feel like food doesn't control you anymore?
So one of the things I that I struggle that I wanted to encourage people to do that has helped me is that, you know, my my kind of battle with food started when I was like 8 years old or younger. And so it's really something that maybe like if I compare myself to people who didn't start to struggle till they were older in life, sometimes they can kind of get over the hurdle and go back to kind of how they were. But for me, I think I've more so just accepted this is going to be more or less like a lifelong battle. And I'm okay with that. I don't think I was okay with that maybe when we spoke, but I have become more okay with it. And that doesn't mean that I'm always going to be in a weight that I don't love. Because I did put on some weight again after my third baby. But I do think it's really important that if we find ourselves back in a place where we were, or back in a place where we're feeling unhealthy, um, that we ask for help. And there are so many places to get help. If you can't afford, like right now we're um, using our last pennies to pay for a nutritionist because I felt it was important enough to have some extra support. Um, but I know there's so many different resources. Obviously, the books that you have are a great resource. That was something I used for help several times that helped me. Um, I know sometimes insurances will pay for a nutritionist. Um, there is WIC, which is like pregnancy support for food, and they even have nutritionists. So, not that you have to be using a nutritionist. Just I just think if you're in a place where you feel like you're kind of snowballing, or you're just like, this, I'm not feeling healthy. I'm not healthy. I think we kind of all have a gauge of where that kind of is, hopefully, um, to get help, have support, because if we can't do it on our own, then we should seek out help. And even if it's your 20th, 25th, 30th time, trying something new, I think it's okay. It's okay to say, like, yeah, it's scary because I'm nervous that this next thing's not going to work. Well, that's okay. You can try it and give your best effort. And yeah, so that's something that I wanted to share, that I have definitely kind of learned in the last few years,
Yeah. And I would also
seeking help.
say, let's see, so I kept my weight off since 2007 or 2008.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's a long time. But
Hmm.
during that time, I have rejoined Weight Watchers with the little app. I
Hmm.
bet maybe 2 or 3 times during that
Hmm.
time where I only had to lose maybe like 4 pounds, hardly
Okay.
anything. But I still felt like food was controlling me and
Mm,
that I just couldn't get it off with my 3 meals and one snack. And
yes.
it's not like 4 or 5 pounds makes any difference. That makes no difference. But it just felt like I needed to go back to strict boundaries so
Hmm.
that I could break free from the control of food. And as soon as I
Yeah.
did, after maybe 3 weeks or so, I mean, it didn't take me that long to lose the weight. It also kind of reset me.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think do what you need to do, because even I mean, everybody talks about, intuitive eating or,
Mm,
non-diet 3 meals and one snack. That's what I
right.
do.
Uh-huh.
But sometimes it helps to have the structure of a program. You're just in a position of life where you need to. And I don't know what kind of
Yes.
program you're doing when you go back, but I agree. I second your advice.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And oh, it can be, I think, daunting to think about, you know, the yo-yo, because that can be frustrating. But and like you kind of said, the couple pounds to you wasn't like the big deal. It was that you felt like you were out of control.
Hmm.
I had kind of written down something along those lines of, I think, actually I wrote down some verses, if you don't mind me
Yeah,
going
definitely
off
get
really
them
quick.
there.
Um, Matthew chapter 23, verses 25 through 26. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside also will be clean. One more. 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Um, and I wrote these verses down because I understand that for a lot of people, weight loss is more about appearance. And I do think that we don't, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or if you disagree, but I do think it's okay for us to have this desire to maybe, feel better in our skin. Um, but I do think it's important to look at the heart first.
Mm-hmm.
And like that verse says, clean the inside of the cup, and then the outside will be clean. So looking at like you said, you felt like you didn't have control of yourself with food, and looking at the heart and what and where that was coming from, and using boundaries with food to help you through that. Um, and I think another thing that I am working through now is not just taking these scriptures as just some nice phrases, but as truth. These are truth, and accepting them wholeheartedly as truth. Um, I think the other thing, I'm just kind of reading the notes that I had written a couple nights ago. So I talked a little bit about the yo-yo, where it can be exhausting to sometimes try something new again, to lose the weight again, and remaining hopeful that it will get easier. And yeah, it will get easier, but reminding yourself that um, our proclivity toward a certain type of sin can be a blessing if we are using, you know, drawing closer to God to help deal with that sin, especially when this yo-yo dieting kind of brings us to our knees over and over again. And that's how it's been for me. Um, it's been a blessing because it's forced, not forced me, but reminded me, encouraged me to be prayerful and talk to God about these things, be in my Bible looking for answers, because it's a struggle. It's a continual struggle for me. And that reminded me of one other verse, but it's from the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor in spirit. I stole a quote from a website that talked about what that means. So being poor in spirit is someone that just recognizes their great need and that they need to turn to the Lord for grace. If you're spiritually poor, you turn to the Lord in complete dependence. We don't seek and work toward being spiritually poor. It's kind of describing someone of the character who recognizes their great need for Jesus. And so I think that my struggle has, and anyone who struggles with this can use that as a constant reminder of their need for God and his grace.
Yeah, the verse about the heart, I can't remember what exactly it was, but working on the heart.
Okay, Matthew 23, verse 25 to 26. So that is clean the outside of the cup. You clean the outside, but the inside are full of greed and self-indulgence.
There you go. So I
Yeah.
feel like if I'm really, and this happens occasionally, it still happens occasionally. It happens for me usually if I eat too many sweets.
Mm,
I'll just get greedy and
mm,
indulgent, and I'll want as many sweets as possible.
mm-hmm,
And I need to work on my heart. And I can work on my heart by either just getting rid of sweets,
mm-hmm,
because then it's like I'm no longer lusting after them.
mm-hmm,
Actually, a lot of times that is maybe I don't have to completely eliminate them, but I have to cut down. So I guess I have
mm-hmm.
to be careful to say, okay, what makes my heart go into that lusting, indulgent land?
Yeah, yeah,
And for me, it's too many sweets. And
yeah.
then if I've never had to go back to renewing my mind, probably because I truth journaled hundreds of times, before when I first lost the weight. But if
Mm-hmm.
I had to, because a lot of people, I think, I don't think you renewed that much. I think in that interview, you talked about doing the Bible studies. And I think you mentioned something about truth during light, but it didn't seem like you were renewing throughout the day with the food issues.
No, no, it was more so, yeah, in the evenings. And
Yeah,
I still do a version of that in the evening, but not every evening, but
right.
I try.
So if you weren't really renewing throughout the day, you might not have been combating all those lies that came up during the day,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
the diet system you had set up, or the food system you had set up, wasn't making you crave that much. So I think
Yeah.
sometimes when people lose their weight and they lose it quickly and they don't lose it with hundreds of renewing entries, then sometimes it is easier to creep back up and you might have to go back and do that work you didn't do at the beginning because at the beginning you didn't
Mm-hmm.
need to because everything was going so smoothly. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, everybody's different.
Yes.
Yeah,
So I totally hear what you're
completely
saying.
different. So,
Yeah. And I think what I have learned about what you're talking about, the candy, where you start to get this greed, and it's confusing because we don't really understand like where this is coming from. But I think a big piece of it is that these candies, or for me right now, honestly, my biggest thing right now that is hard for me is McDonald's,
uh-huh.
because we can drive through. I don't have to get all my kids out. It's inexpensive, but of course, like I would, it's not good. But I think that they're made to be addictive. And so we kind of
Hmm.
like wonder like what on earth, why do I become like a monster with this? Or, it's hard to break it. And I think it's because they're really made to be addictive. And so
Which is
like,
interesting because people would say, oh, but all foods are from God. We should all enjoy
mm,
them. But you know what? The addictive foods were not from God. They were created by man. The ones
yeah,
that
scientific
come from the
labs.
garden and that were
Yeah.
not created by man. I don't know
Yeah.
that any of them, even honey's not addictive. I don't think. If I eat a sweet with honey, it's like, so.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I have kind of added to my journaling in the evening, and it really is truth journaling, because you're taking like trying to figure out what these thoughts are that are, going awry and replacing them. Another thing I have found helpful is repenting too. Because not,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the weight issue isn't a result of sin, indulgence. I know that's a hard one for people. I do feel like it is for me. I think I use food and overindulgence as a type of like therapy. And so repenting of that, because it affects my family, it affects my health. Um, and yeah, so the layers, and looking at the Bible about like how we repent and the different steps of repentance, and working through that has helped me with the McDonald's issue.
Oh, uh-huh.
Um, and this is a little bit unrelated, but not really, because we're talking about like removing like addictive foods. Heard a story the other day from a guy on Focus on the Family. He's one of the ministers that Focus on the Family, and I just loved it. This picture it created. He was visiting Texas in the summer, and he's a runner. So he decided to go for a run outside,
Mm.
and just didn't really dawn on him that that was a bad idea. I haven't been to Texas personally, but I just hear that in Texas in the summer, people just stay inside because it's so hot.
Right.
So he goes for a run without water or anything, and um, a long run, lengthy run. And so he's kind of out in the middle of nowhere and just so thirsty, so thirsty that he just couldn't stand it anymore. He saw a woman out in her yard with her kids, and he ran up to her and said, "I'm so sorry, but can I drink from your hose?" And she said, "Oh, okay, yeah." So he turned on the hose, and he said he just started drinking the water right when it came out. He said it was disgusting. It was boiling hot.
Oh.
It was gross hose water that had probably been sitting in there for who knows long.
Uh-huh.
And he said it was it was such a good like image of kind of sometimes what can happen to us when we are stuck in a habit. So for me, in the last, you know, several months, it's been the McDonald's drive-through. And when you're driving through and you feel like you have no self-control to stop yourself, just like he couldn't stop himself from drinking this hot hose water, he didn't even have the ability to let the water run till it got cold. He was so thirsty. And he said, this is kind of what happens to us in those moments where we feel we have no control. It's not necessarily that we don't have control of the situation because we can't stop in the moment. It's actually something that if you take 20 steps backwards, um, the fact that he went for a run without water in Texas in the middle of the summer, like he took steps backwards, then you can kind of get this idea of like, look, I've come to this place where I have to drink this hot hose water and not able to say no because of something that happened 20 steps back. Does that make any sense?
Well, it makes real sense. And it
Yeah.
makes me even think of like, say, the sweets boundaries. If I
Yeah.
want to not get to the point where you're always craving sweets, then I can't have them often. I
Yeah.
have to stick to my more rare, rarely sort of boundaries. In fact, that's one of the things you talked about in that last interview. You put it on the
Uh-huh.
calendar when you had a sweet, when you're
Yes.
going to have it. You could do
Yes.
that to
Yes.
McDonald's. But
Oh, I like
it's
that
like
idea.
figure out what you need to do now to have control later. Is that kind of what you're
Yes.
saying? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And I
Uh-huh.
know I know the Bible tells us that God will give us the self-control that we need. And I believe that's true. And so when there's times when I do pull up to the drive-through, I'm like, this is something that's gone awry. 20 steps back. I have to take a relook at what is going on in our day. And that's something I have worked through a lot with the nutritionist that I'm using. She works a lot with me on these types of things. Um,
And I would say more often than not, or I bet at least as often, it's not something food related, it's life related. So
absolutely.
it's something
Yes.
that happened, some hard thing in life that happened that we did not process emotionally. And
Mm-hmm.
so then we're just going to go out and eat, or we're
Yes.
procrastinate, or some other thing where that's why it's just as important or more important to be growing in those other areas of our lives, renewing our mind in the other areas of our lives and not just with food.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one thing that makes the temptation it removes the power a little bit is making sure that we are eating regularly and nutritious food. But really, like you said, that does help a bit. But I think absolutely it's to do with stress and your thoughts and your
Right.
boundaries. It's not just about hunger. Yeah, I think that's a small piece of it. And um yeah, like I said, for me, stress is a big one. And you asked me to talk a little bit to touch on that. And I think what I have learned through my experience with CrossFit is I'm just somebody that has to make exercise a priority. Um, because it's such a beautiful and instant fix. There's not really there once I'm doing that, there's not really a whole lot more that I have to be doing to address my anxiety. Right now, I haven't gone to CrossFit since my son was born. My last workout was several hours before my water broke. And um, that was wonderful. I think I made everyone in the gym uncomfortable.
Yeah, I suppose. I suppose
Yeah.
that's not the maternity crowd at the CrossFit gym.
Well, actually, the cool thing it was almost all the women there, including the coaches, had worked out through their pregnancies.
Oh, that's
So
nice.
they were very supportive, but some of the other people were like, "Whoa, you should not be here. You're so pregnant." But um yeah, so I am in desperate like I'm desperate to go back to CrossFit, but with having 3 kids and being stay-at-home mom, it's not something that's naturally fitting into our life right now. So we are in the process of getting some equipment set up in the gym so that my husband and I can just kind of slip into the garage to do our workouts.
That's good.
Um,
Well, one
yeah,
of the main things I hear you saying just throughout is that, where it makes me think of that, first of all, life happens. After our last interview, you had 2 kids, you had COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And we just, and life, it's a walk with God. And
Mm-hmm.
if we have a propensity to struggle with something, that's probably going to keep coming back. We might be walking
Yeah.
in victory. I've been walking in victory for a lot of years, but that doesn't mean I'm never tempted and I never go back to where I have a heart that's
Mm-hmm.
greedy for food. So, um,
Yeah.
I guess do what we need to do to try and stay close to God, and, don't beat yourself up when you fail, give yourself
Mm-hmm.
grace,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of keep moving forward with God, I guess.
Absolutely. Keep moving forward. Yep. And like you said, don't beat yourself up, especially if you're in the time frame of your life of making babies. Like I just think you have to be like proud of your body for all that it goes through doing during these years. So thankful and proud. And my tummy has not gone back the way it did with the first two. I don't know if it's like the third child thing, but it just hasn't gone back. And I'm just like trying trying to encourage myself that, it's okay to both want to improve, but also be proud of what my body has done, you know,
Hmm.
the blessings that it's brought.
It's a gorgeous body, this birth, 3 kids.
Exactly. I know we have to be grateful. And if for some people if that rings, the saggy and the rolls, or, we move. I don't want to like, I know there's a lot of people that listen that are looking for encouragement to lose weight, and I'm not trying to dampen that in any way, but I think while we're also moving forward, we should still just thank our bodies and thank God for our bodies that do amazing things, and just kind of embrace like the sag. That's because your body did something amazing, you know. And so I'm a little bit more proud of this sag than,
I
you
love
know.
that.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, yeah, and also just don't objectify yourself to say you have to look this certain way. You have
No.
to be
Oh
this
no.
twiggy person. I mean, exercise, that's something vibrant and something that's good for you, that's going to help you, that's going to help
Mhm.
the people who are around you, and yeah, just embracing your body and its as is condition. It's not like we don't have to look perfect, but
No.
but that said, we also want to be healthy. We want
Yes.
to do what we can so that we can be healthy enough to
Do God's
uh,
work.
yeah, to do God's
Yeah.
work. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for me too, even as a writer, I need it just for mental health. All those things
Mm-hmm.
for mental health.
Yeah.
And if I'm eating too many sweets, I can tell it in my brain. I get the brain
Mm.
fog.
Yes.
And I don't
Yeah.
know that everybody does that, but I do.
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Food affects me, my thinking significantly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to plug my nutritionist
Okay.
because
Yeah, do.
if you don't mind, because she has been a godsend for me.
Definitely, because people are
Godsend.
often looking for somebody. So yeah, give
Yeah,
us.
she is a post prenatal like specialist. She works with, I'm sure, all women, but I think if you're, yeah. Her name is Elena Coyle. It's called Elena Coyle Coaching. Um, and it's spelled Elaina, and then her last name is Koyl, and then coaching. And I'm sure I could send you that link
Yeah, send me a link
for
and
her
I'll put it in the
website.
show notes too.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. Yeah, she's
Okay.
in New York, but I use her through Skype, so it doesn't matter.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And Sarah's in Washington, so I guess you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
use her anywhere.
yeah.
Okay, well, Sarah, thanks so much for coming on again and giving us an update. And it's just really good to visit with you, just as it
Yeah.
was
Thanks
last
for
time we
having
visited.
me. Yeah, and thanks for letting me just unload all my thoughts on you, Barb.
I know. I wish everybody could see us. I really need to figure out how to get these podcasts where everybody can see us. But anyway, it's just
Oh,
fun
yeah.
because,
Yeah.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
outside on your porch. And okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. It's good to be with you. And thank you, Sarah, for being here. Everybody
Yes, my pleasure.
have a great week following God and following your boundaries. And I will talk to you next time.